Idaho parachuted 76 beavers into a dead forest in 1948, never seen again until now. In 1948, a plane flew over the mountains of Idaho and started dropping beavers out of the sky. 76 of them, each one packed into a wooden box strapped to a military parachute, falling into one of the most remote wilderness areas in America. At the time, it was dismissed as a strange but clever relocation project, just a quirky experiment. But that story doesn't hold up, because when you track the exact drop locations and compare them to modern satellite images, something doesn't make sense. In a region that's drying out, where forests are struggling, there are patches of land that are still thriving. Greener, wetter, alive. And they appear exactly where those beavers landed. Then it gets worse. In 1980, the government sealed off this entire region, millions of acres. No roads, no vehicles, almost no human access. Which means for decades, whatever those beavers built has been left completely untouched. No oversight, no control, no one watching. A perfect, isolated experiment. So this isn't just a weird story from 1948, it's a question. What did those beavers create out there? And why has it been left alone for 77 years? The official record suggests this was a desperate, seat-of-the-pants response to a wildlife crisis. We are told that Elmo Heater, a regional conservation officer, simply looked at a pile of surplus military parachutes and had a wild idea. But when you examine the technical specifications of what he actually built, that narrative begins to fray. In his 1950 paper published in the Journal of Wildlife Management, Heater describes a level of mechanical precision that suggests something far more calculated than a quirky experiment. He designed a specialized wooden crate, a box that functioned like a clamshell, held shut during flight by a complex arrangement of ropes and heavy elastic bands. The tension was calibrated so that the moment the crate hit the ground, the impact would snap the external lashings and the internal springs would force the box open automatically. Let me say that again, more slowly. The design required the box to stay closed through terminal velocity and the opening shock of a parachute, only to open precisely upon contact with the earth. This wasn't a guess. Heater spent weeks conducting drop tests with weighted boxes and eventually with a beaver named Geronimo. We're told Geronimo was dropped dozens of times because he enjoyed it. But I want to be careful here. I'm not saying there was a hidden motive, but I am asking why a state employee was perfecting high-altitude cargo deployment techniques for a rodent. If you're finding this investigation into the lost engineering of the 1940s worth your time, consider subscribing. This series goes into archives most channels won't touch. Now, back to Heater's design, because we're just getting started. Remember the elastic springs. They were the only way to ensure the beavers could walk free without a human being present to open the door. It was a masterclass in mid-century logistics designed to solve the coordination problem of the Idaho backcountry, a way to deploy a biological force into a region where humans simply could not survive. But to understand why they were so determined to get these animals into that specific valley, you have to understand the catastrophe that was unfolding across the rest of the American West. And that catastrophe started with a gold rush that had nothing to do with metal. Before the 1600s, the North American beaver population was estimated at somewhere between 60 and 400 million animals. Their dams and wetlands covered hundreds of thousands of square miles, effectively acting as a continent-wide water filtration and storage system. We are taught that the fur trade was a period of rugged exploration and frontier commerce, but the data suggests it was actually the first large-scale extractive industry in American history. It was a mammalian gold rush. Between 1700 and 1900, the coordinated hunting efforts of the Hudson's Bay Company, the Northwest Company, and the American Fur Company systematically erased the beaver from the landscape. By 1900, a population of hundreds of millions had collapsed to a mere 100,000 survivors. The official record treats this as a wildlife tragedy, but the evidence indicates it was a hydrological catastrophe. Without beaver dams to slow the flow, streams cut deeper, faster channels. Floodplains dried out. Water tables dropped. The very sponges of the American West were squeezed dry and discarded. By the 1930s, the Department of the Interior calculated that while moving a single beaver cost $8, that same animal produced $300 in hydrological value, erosion control, and water storage over its lifetime. Let me say that again more slowly. The government realized that a wild rodent was 36 times more efficient at land management than a human engineer. Hold that detail, because it explains the desperation of 1948. The American forest had become a tinderbox, and the only force capable of hydrating it was nearly extinct. Multiple competing colonial powers, Britain, France, and the United States, all arrived at the same result: the total removal of a keystone species, followed by a century of silence regarding the consequences. The pattern suggests that the West didn't just become dry, it was made dry. But if the goal was to put the engineers back, why drop them into a place where they could never be monitored? That brings us to a geographic anomaly that defies the logic of conservation. If you look at a map of central Idaho, you'll find the Chamberlain Basin, a high-altitude plateau surrounded by some of the most unforgiving vertical terrain in the lower 48. In 1948, this was the chosen landing zone for Elmo Heater's 76 beavers. The official explanation is simple. It was remote, it was empty, and it was inaccessible by road, making it the perfect place to put nuisance animals where they could no longer interfere with human expansion. On the surface, that logic holds. But when you overlay the 1948 drop coordinates with the legislative maps of the next 30 years, a different pattern begins to emerge. In 1980, the United States Congress passed the Central Idaho Wilderness Act, creating what is now the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. This act didn't just protect the land, it effectively entombed it. It encompasses 2.3 million acres where the use of any motorized vehicle, including helicopters, chainsaws, or even bicycles, is strictly prohibited by federal law. I want you to hold that detail. The very animals we dropped into the wild via military-grade aviation in 1948 were, 30 years later, sealed inside a zone where aviation is now a criminal offense. The coordination here is staggering. You have a state-level wildlife experiment in the 40s, followed by a federal-level lockdown in the 80s, both arriving at the same functional result: the total removal of human oversight. It created a geographic black box where the descendants of those beavers have been allowed to engineer the landscape for nearly 8 decades without a single human witness to verify their progress. We are taught that these are separate bureaucratic events, but the evidence indicates a singular outcome: the creation of a massive, unmonitored laboratory. And yet, for 65 years, the one piece of evidence that could prove what was happening inside that box, the original archival film of the drop, simply ceased to exist. To understand why, we have to look at the institutional silence that followed the Beechcraft's final flight. The Idaho Department of Fish and Game officially documented the 1948 drop on 16mm color film. It was the visual proof of Elmo Heater's success, the definitive record of Geronimo's descent and the 76 engineers who landed in the Chamberlain Basin. But then, for 65 years, that film disappeared. The official explanation is that it was simply mislabeled and misplaced in the state archives, a victim of standard bureaucratic drift. We are asked to believe that the most significant, surreal, and successful wildlife operation in Idaho's history was essentially forgotten by the very institution that conducted it. I want to be precise here. I'm not claiming there was a physical heist of the film. I am suggesting that there was a coordination of silence. For over half a century, while the American West suffered through worsening droughts and catastrophic wildfires, the visual evidence that we had a working, low-cost solution remained lost in a basement. It wasn't until 2015 that an archivist finally found the footage, but even then, it was released to the public as a quirky novelty, a viral bit of nostalgia. If these patterns of misplaced history are raising questions you haven't seen raised elsewhere, consider sharing this work. The deeper this scrutiny reaches, the harder it becomes to ignore the silence. Now, Back to the film, because the suppression isn't just about the past. By framing the 1948 drop as a joke, the institutional narrative ensures we don't look too closely at the results. Let me say that again, more slowly. If the footage is just a curiosity, you won't ask what happened to the beavers after the camera stopped rolling. You won't ask why the land they landed on was sealed off in 1980. And you certainly won't think to look at the modern satellite data that shows the true extent of their work. But that's exactly what I did. And when you look at the NASA Earth Observatory imagery, the quirky story from 1948 turns into a modern technological anomaly. When you examine the multispectral data from the NASA Earth Observatory, the Chamberlain Basin begins to look less like a wilderness and more like an industrial site. The official story of the American West is currently one of aridification, a slow, measurable transition from forest to scrubland as the climate dries. According to the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or NDVI, most of central Idaho is losing its moisture retention at a steady, documented rate. But then, you look at the 1948 drop coordinates. In these specific high-altitude drainages, the satellite data indicates a complete reversal of the regional trend. Where the surrounding mountains are browning, these basins are vibrating with deep, saturated green. It's not just a seasonal fluke. By comparing decades of Landsat imagery, you can see these green anomalies expanding outward from the original 1948 impact points. I want you to hold that image. While human-managed forests are failing, these unmanaged pockets are thriving. The official records describe these areas as pristine, implying that their health is a natural default. But the evidence suggests that this lushness isn't a result of the landscape being left alone. It's a result of it being aggressively engineered by the descendants of the 76. Let me say that again, more slowly. We are witnessing a hydrological miracle that is only possible because of our total absence. The pattern is undeniable. NASA's thermal sensors show that these beaver-rich valleys are significantly cooler and more fire-resistant than the managed forests just a few miles away. Multiple institutional data sets, NASA imagery, Forest Service fire maps, and state water records all point to the same physical evidence. A 77-year-old experiment is outperforming every modern climate mitigation strategy we have. But if the evidence is this visible from space, why are we still treating it as a quirky anecdote? The answer leads to a final coordination problem that suggests our entire approach to the burning West is a choice. The pattern is now impossible to ignore. We have an elite engineering masterclass disguised as a quirky experiment. We have a continental hydrological collapse followed by a century of silence. We have a state-level airdrop in 1948, a federal-level lockdown in 1980, and a 65-year archival blackout, all converging to hide a biological machine that is currently outperforming our best technology. It forces us to confront one genuine, devastating question. Is the death of our forests a natural tragedy, or is it a product of our refusal to let go of the steering wheel? I don't have the answer. I want to be honest about that. But once you see the shape of the silence, you cannot unsee it. The military-grade crates, the mammalian gold rush, the legislative tomb of the Frank Church wilderness, the green anomalies visible from orbit, the 77 years of uninterrupted labor. If this series is worth something to you, consider commenting your thoughts or theories below. The next video goes somewhere I wasn't sure I was ready to go. I think I am now. The next thread leads to a set of secret fire refugia maps that the Forest Service refuses to acknowledge, and I don't think any of us are prepared for where that ends. In the end, we are left with 76 parachutes, a silent basin, and a green miracle that happened because we weren't there to stop it.